When you're watching a shitty movie like this, you want to reference a better movie. Welcome to Your Inner Child's an Idiot, the podcast where we look back on the things from your childhood and wonder if they were any good to begin with. My name is Damon. Flawless.
I'm DJ. You scared the shit out of me. I don't know why.
Keep you on your toes. You didn't know you were podcasting until this very second.
I knew the word was coming. I didn't know the force behind it was coming.
I'm a passionate speaker. What can I say? I believe in the power of audio.
We're talking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Wait, not colon. No.
Is it and the Last Crusade? Or
it's a whole phrase, so it's a whole subject line, so there's no need for colons.
Right.
Commas.
Indiana Jones.
No dashes, M dashes, or N dashes. Indiana Jones
his Last
and
Crusade?
the Last Crusade.
And, okay. That was really annoying, all the crosstalk. I'm really sorry, everyone, that had to listen to that. So.
Felt like a Robert Altman movie. Hold on, let it land. And go.
We got our Sean Connery in this one, finally. We've been waiting patiently for nigh on a decade. And
since they hinted at him in the first one, in the post-credits sequence of the first one.
Well, you know how Disney films have hidden Mickeys? There's hidden Connerys all over Raiders of the Lost Ark, if you pay attention very closely. This is, I think, I don't know if this was the first one I saw, but this was always my favorite. This one.
DJ?
No reaction. Okay.
This is also my favorite.
Oh, shit.
Of them. And also, I mean, similar to you, it's the one that I remember the most, probably because I was a sentient being by the time this one came out in 89.
Yeah.
So I was well aware that what Indiana Jones was and how much my mom loved both Sean Connery and Harrison Ford. It was a perfect storm for getting mom to the movies. Like, the only way you were getting mom to the movies is if Harrison Ford was in something or Sean Connery was in something. So this was like the algorithm before the algorithm was an algorithm coming in and like getting her. Because like we're seeing Medicine Man with Sean Connery in the theater. We're seeing Regarding Henry with Harrison Ford in the theater. Patriot Games, all your favorites, all the hits. The Fugitive, of course, The Fugitive. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, just kidding. Yeah, so this was a favorite of my family's. We watched it a lot. It is also the more comedic of the three. Like it really leans into the comedy of it. And as I've said many a times, if you can get me to laugh, I will forgive a multitude of sins. If you can make me laugh. And this one, the chemistry between Harrison Ford, notorious pointer, and Sean Connery, notorious wife beater, is really good. Just had to get it in there. I just had to remind everyone that Sean Connery not only has said that women deserve a slap if they cross their husbands, when asked about it in the 80s, like called out on that quote that he had made, he stood by it with Barbara Walters. He's like, yeah, I said it. So
not great.
He seems great.
God rest his soul, though. So, you know, humor is a big part of this whole trilogy, but this really leans into it. And also, I think, hits my particular taste in humor, even as a kid and even now. And most of it is you see Indiana Jones, who has always gotten a little bit like of egg on his face while he's being the cocky adventurer, but you really see him like kowtow to his dad in a way that it's a new side of the character. You've like seen like maybe some sides of it, but generally speaking, this is the first time you see where he came from and why he might have such bravado and why like of course, you get River Phoenix, too, at the beginning of the movie.
All right, yeah.
As young Indiana Jones, which led to the whole young Indiana Jones 2, which I never really understood or got into, but I did like it in this movie.
Yeah, I never got into young Indiana Jones, although it gave us a baby, Ryan Gosling as young Indiana Jones.
That's right.
And I believe there's even a cameo from Harrison Ford on one episode as Indiana Jones, reprising his role. I think you're right in that Indiana Jones works as a character because he is cocky and sort of self-assured, but he's not above like fucking up. Like he doesn't fall into the John McClane trap where he just becomes a superhuman being. Like he's constantly getting the shit kicked out of him. He's constantly bleeding. His plans often will fail or not work the way he thought they would. And I think that's what makes him such a likable character, even though he might have flaws like, being a Lothario and being...
You cad.
cocky. Yeah, a cad, a ne'er-do-well, a man about town. I think the reason this works is because they have established that so well in the previous movies that then seeing him, like, what's left to see of this character in the third movie? And they show us, like, well, we're going to show you the dynamic with his father, who is the complete opposite. Like, his father is also a professor, but very much an academic. One of my favorite descriptions of his character is from Harrison Ford, where he says he's the teacher that kids hope they don't get. Like that's how he's described. And he's sort of like, he's not a stick in the mud, but he is definitely a little bit more offended by the violence that seems to surround his son. I mean, he slaps his son for using the Lord's name in vain. He definitely is not impressed by his son's like action bits. Like I think after the motorcycle chase at one point in this movie, he's like winding his watch. He's not into it. It's very charming. And then you see Harrison Ford does a great job of snapping into the role as the son, where he says, yes, sir, no, sir. He's very, even though you can tell he's like bristling at having to be with his dad, just like any human, he sort of falls into that role like subconsciously, even while you can tell he doesn't like it. He doesn't like being around his dad or following around on this adventure with his dad. It's very charming. It's great. It definitely adheres much more to Raiders than Temple of Doom. It feels to follow those similar beats. He goes on an adventure, then he goes to his school, and then he's, pulled into this adventure again. I also have watched this movie a million more times than the other three. So I'm just replaying it in my head at like 3 times the speed.
There's a lot of reference to previous movies, especially Raiders. But
you get Brody and Sala come back for this one.
And then also they're underneath the catacombs at one point, and there's a hieroglyph of something or whatever of the Lost Ark. And she's like, is it the Lost Ark? It's the Lost Ark of the Covenant. Pretty sure. I like that. But it's, it's like an oblique reference, but also not as ham-handed as it could have been. Although we'll see if maybe I'm glossing over some of that in my head. But as you mentioned, with the good action set pieces and the humor, it does kind of forgive a lot more sins for me. And I'm sure they're still in here.
We got the Nazis coming back, so I think there's still probably some problematic depictions of brown peoples in this movie, but we're back to beating up white supremacists, which helps that all go down a lot better in that they are not the villains necessarily. It's just, we got to get these Nazis. If you could just pardon me, I need to get to that Nazi to kill him.
Excuse me.
Quick. Yeah. I do remember there was a Diet Coke commercial where, because we rented this a lot from Blockbuster, and so there was a Diet Coke commercial on the tape. Like even, 10 years, 15 years after the fact, there was a Diet Coke commercial where these two people were watching Last Crusade and someone, hey, honey, why don't you go get me a Diet Coke from the fridge? And this woman has to she jumps over all these snakes to get to the fridge. And then when she opens the fridge, there's what is coded as a Diet Pepsi. And then there's a Diet Coke. And then while she's there, the knight is saying, you have chosen wisely. And she picks the Diet Coke and,
That's pretty good.
And then I think the husband says something ridiculous like, that Indiana, how does he do it? And the wife goes, whew.
Whew. That's stupid.
I don't know why I recounted that, but it's lived in my head. I can't remember my boyfriend's birthday, but that I can remember.
I also quote that exact line all the time. You have chosen poorly.
It's a fun movie to quote.
Well, let's see if it holds up. We're going to watch Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade.
You're doing great.
Preparing to say that, I wanted to say in The Last Crusade. Also,
you think Crusade. It's a Sex in the City, Sex and the City type deal for you.
Yeah, I get them confused. And I just realized even saying The Last Crusade is a little bit problematic in and of itself. But it's maybe not necessarily.
There is a character that you meet that was in the Crusades. So, it kind of, you know what, Damon? Stop carrying water for it. It is a problematic choice.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
We're going to watch it. Watch along with us. We'll be right back. Okay. Holy Grail. Something with the Holy Grail.
Everlasting Life. French Knights. There was that Diet Coke commercial.
These are just levels of support on Patreon that you're naming.
Diet Coke can, French Knight, Nazi you fucked.
Nazi you and your father fucked.
tapestries.
If any of those things interest you, become a supporter of the show. Patreon.com/Your Inner Child is an Idiot. And if not, that's fine. Just keep on listening. That's the soft sell. I just give everybody the soft sell.
Yeah, you want to use reverse psychology. They're like, well, if he doesn't need our support, I guess I have to donate. He seems pretty casual about it. A man so casual, that's a podcast I've got to support.
Just over here smoking a cigarette. That's how relaxed I am, whether you donate or not. I don't care.
Take it or leave it. That's our podcast. I got scared a little, even though I'm not. Why would I donate?
And we are back. We watched Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade.
Under the Last Crusade, under the Tuscan sun.
Is it and, as usual, Indiana Jones
Yeah, it's
and The Last
never
Crusade?
been in.
Well, he's a character that is in this movie, so
Okay, no, yeah.
it makes more sense to me to say in than and, because it's like we're just looking at two things. We're looking at Indiana Jones and we're looking at The Last Crusade. To me, Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade is those two things together, galloping along into the sunset.
Anytime you see a movie title and there's a character's name in there, you are confused as to their relationship of the film unless the preposition in is in the title. So Scott Pilgrim in versus the world. That's what you would prefer.
No, see, that's its own sentence, but like you wouldn't say
Austin Powers in The Man Who Shagged Me.
I'm trying to think of a character that's not also the title of the movie, although that kind of doesn't apply here, but like it's not.
That's what we're talking about.
It's not Luke Skywalker and Star Wars. It's Luke Skywalker
never been that.
In Star Wars.
It's never been that.
Yeah, it doesn't work because there are no other movies that I can think of.
You think that Indiana Jones, it's like a best-selling author or something? Or like an actor who's gotten so big that he's like part of his contract is like, I want my name above the title. You think that's what this is. You think that Indiana Jones is an actor with a great agent. That's what you think this is.
That's what it feels like. And Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade just sounds like they're buddies. It's a buddy cop. And like, you know, Indiana Jones is like the slovenly one, and The Last Crusade is the fastidious, kind of racist one. I mean,
but man, do they solve the case
together.
Originally, it was going to be Indiana Jones and Tony Randall, but they were like, you know what? Last Crusade is free. Let's bring him in. Let's just do a test. Let's just see how they get along
with this fictional character, Indiana Jones, and this real actor, Tony Randall, not Harrison Ford.
No, in this universe, he doesn't exist because Indiana Jones already exists. And if Harrison Ford existed, they'd be like, hey, that guy looks a lot like famed archaeologist and occasional actor, Indiana Jones.
Okay, recap this movie for the fine folks.
No, come on. I did Temple of Doom, the racist one.
Okay. All right. Indiana Jones. We flash back to Indiana Jones as a youth. He sees a guy who's like, hey, I got to cop his style. And through this adventure, he loses the artifact to this guy, but the guy has a cool hat and a whip, and so he learns that from him.
The guy doesn't have a whip.
Oh, that's a cool hat and a cool jacket. And he also learns, maybe my dad is withholding. We'll probably explore that in this movie.
Maybe he's got a cool demeanor to raising me.
He also gets his famed chin scar, because we definitely need an explanation for that.
Hey, what's all that? We, as viewers, said in the last two movies.
And we didn't just go, I guess he does kind of have a scar on his chin.
I guess we all have scars in a way, so I wouldn't need any more explanation.
He also gets his whip, his fear of snakes, his fedora, his jacket, and his insecurity issues from his father, all in this
in a 5-hour span.
In this prologue. And then we fast forward to later in the, I don't know, what is it? What year is it? 1937? 1935?
Nazi times. 1939, I think.
And Indiana Jones gets roped in to go after the Holy Grail, which is, in this case, literally the Holy Grail.
It's not Amelie this time. It's not. It's not Mary Magdalene's great niece.
We're gonna make a lot of Da Vinci Code jokes today, folks. So strap in.
When you're watching a shitty movie like this, you want to reference a better movie. We were all watching this and daydreaming that we were watching Robert Langdon on one of his iconographic adventures.
I always say watching Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade is the opportunity to kneel before the bones of Mary Magdalene. That's really what we do here. Okay, so Indiana Jones rescues his father from the Nazis, who he's like dedicated his life, and so Indiana Jones goes with him.
He's dedicated his life to the Grail, not to the Nazis.
To the Grail, yes. And the Nazis have captured him. He rescues him, but then eventually they lead them to the Grail, and Daddy Jones gets shot. And in order to save him, young Indiana Jr. has to go through the 3 trials, and he does so with the help of his father's journal. And he's in the chamber of the Holy Grail, guarded by the last living Knight Templar, and he chooses the correct chalice, drinks from it, has eternal life, but only in the building, which you think they would have mentioned that somewhere in the writings.
Oh, you got to read the fine print. It's like a timeshare, presentation. It's a trick.
Yeah.
Just get the cab. Don't go. Don't get stopped by those guys in the airport. It just keep going.
Your insurance actually covers the car you're in usually, most liability insurance, so you're fine. So he, luckily, also not mentioned, but helpful, the water from the Grail will actually remove the wound from his father and heal him completely. But in doing so, Elsa gets a hold of it. This is our Nazi girlfriend that I forgot to mention in this recap. She is just kind of taken in by the power of the One Ring, the Holy Grail, and she goes across the seal, which the knight did mention. This was in the writing, not in the writings, but in the introductory video. And the whole place begins to fall. The Grail falls, but our heroes escape, and they literally ride off into the sunset.
DJ, that may have been
Nazis bad, Grail good.
One of the worst recaps we've ever had on this show. It's like you put it into a translator and then like into Japanese and then back into English and then read it.
What was wrong with that? What did I not get?
You know what? Now that I think about it, it was flawless. And
what of this 2-hour, 15-minute movie did I miss in that
single flaw.
Wandering 30-second?
Elsa, who I did not mention, who's also one of our main antagonists.
I did forget about Elsa. Sorry about that.
I just think it's interesting that you forgot the one woman in the main cast. I just thought that was interesting that you forgot to even mention
is that on me, or is that because she's still not super well drawn?
She's a Nazi. She sucks on lips. I feel like I've got a good idea of what she's like.
I also barely mentioned Henry Ford and his
anti-Semitism.
Henry Jones Sr., who, let's be honest, probably has some isms in his character. I barely mentioned him, and he is the best character in this movie.
Well, fantastic. I like the recap of the recap. Let's just dive on in, shall we?
Look, I'm bad at recaps. I wasn't ready to do it. I thought you were going to do it.
I know. That was one of my
I always
tricks.
forget the beginning of this movie starts with young Indiana Jones. Like, if we were talking about it, I'd be like, oh, yeah. But when I go to watch it, because so many times that I've seen this movie, it's like on TV or something. And I'm like, well, I'm going to watch this now. It's very rarely do you like start at the beginning of the movie. It's like kind of in progress. And I'm always like, all right, we do this whole young Indiana thing. And I don't love that.
Oh, really? I love it.
I was going to say, I don't love that in general when movies do that.
My apologies. Continue your thought.
But for some reason, and Lauren put the nail on the head, she said, I should hate this, but I don't. And for some reason, so I think it's probably because it's just well done. River Phoenix is great, and it's Spielberg, so there's some it's well directed. But it's like, Spielberg did this, right? Did I just
it's still Spielberg.
Out? Okay.
Spielberg does the first 4, and we're going to lose him in the 5th one.
There's only 3 of these. There are no more after this, and I'm really glad, because I think it would be weird.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, like we said in the horrible recap, he gets all of his character quirks
iconic
are explained in one adventure, which is really unnecessary. But it's also just kind of fun. It's just kind of silly. And you're not for some reason, this doesn't bother me, but Solo does, where they're you're traveling alone?
In this movie's, I know, oh my God. Finally, I get an explanation of his name. Oh, that's how he got his blaster, a weapon that almost everyone else also has in Star Wars. Finally, the explanations are flooding in.
That's where you got your Space Henley that you wear on your adventures.
Oh, that's where. Oh, so he just bought the vest at a vest shop.
Just show him going That's a pretty good price. Oh, now we know.
Do you have any more in the back? You do. Great.
It was a sale at the Space Gap.
I mean, in this movie's defense, the part that you're referring to is, 2 hours shorter than Solo was?
That's true. That's a good point.
And didn't solely exist to explain the parsecs thing, and then that's it? I feel like the whole reason Solo existed, and I feel like, you know what, I'm going to go on one of my patented rants. I feel like the whole reason that most of these fucking movies that or shows that Star Wars is creating, at least with original or with old school characters, is to just explain some like facet that fans have been like poking holes in for 30 years. And it's like, look, we like doing that. It doesn't really matter. No one's actually going to the parsecs thing and going, I knew it all along. Star Wars fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Because of that parsecs line. Like, just leave it alone. Who cares?
It is very like inferiority complex. Like just.
No, there's a whole reason, because the parsec's like a marathon, and the fact that he finished it in a shorter amount of distance, it actually does mean something when you think about it.
When you think about it.
Disney Plus, it's only $7.99. Like, fuck off. Anyway, this is a great prologue.
The purpose of this, the stuff that we mentioned that's like kind of fun, like the getting his fear of snakes and stuff like that, that is not actually the point. I think the character point is his relationship with his dad. That's what we're really setting up. And even though we don't spend a lot of time with that, it does show that like, you know, he like got his kind of swashbuckling adventurer thing from this guy, Fedora or whatever. The guy's name seemed
he was buckling a lot of swash even before he got that fedora from that guy. From Patrick Duffy look-alike?
He was already a swaggerful young man.
And already so mad. Already had that Harrison Ford,
scowl.
I think it's fun. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I mean, it's a fun little action beat. There's horse riding. There's jumping onto a circus train. There's all these, which leads to a bunch of little action sequences of, you know, snakes and lions and rhinoceros erections. It's fun. And I mean, it doesn't wear out its welcome. It's fun to see an origin to this character that we've already known for 2 movies. And yeah, and it ends with, you know, tying into the rest of it is like Sean Connery's secluded professorial father, you know, working on his Grail diary,
making him count.
Buckle up, listeners. We're going to be doing a lot of Sean Connery impressions in this. This is going to be The Rock 2.0 all over again. But it's great. And then I did like, I mean, less charming is the sort of follow-up to the prologue. Is that a pre-prologue, post-prologue, where adult Indiana Jones, still going off the Cross of Coronado that he saw in the prologue, meets up with the, you know, Panama Jack character. And I do want to say one thing that I do like about this second prologue, where they're on this ship in the midst of this storm. The guy has literal henchmen. We've talked about henchmen. I love henchmen. They're sort of a lost art. In the darker, grimmer superhero movies, you lose the henchmen. And I like that this guy literally has like henchmen straight out of a Tintin comic. They're like sailors. They've got blue and they like Jean-Paul Gaultier, like blue and white striped shirts, little, you know, Greek sailor caps, and they're all like big and brawny. They look like they're like bursting out of these clothes. It's deranged. Like they're all wearing the same uniform. Why would they all wear the same uniform? It raises a lot of questions, henchmen. Like, do you all shop? Do you get it in bulk? You have it shipped in? Is Greg still a medium? I don't want to say anything, but again, wait this summer.
He's been bulking up.
Does he need a new, you know, Joker-style blazer? Because all the Joker's henchmen all wear our, you know, purple and green blazers.
They're also so inept that Indiana Jones can punch 2 of them at once.
It was so silly.
Ridiculous.
Luckily, that scene, I think, only lasts like 3 or 4 minutes. And then the ship explodes, despite being absolutely soaking wet. I did write, would the multivo explosivo, which is one of the boxes marked on the deck of the ship, would it still explode if it's been like not only rained upon, but like full waves crashing down on these boxes? Yeah. Either way, it's fun when things explode. And Panama a hat goes by with a hole in it, so you knew he died. There's no way he could possibly not have been attached to his hat when that happened.
He's either dead or he dropped his hat. Those are the 2. Either way, bad day for him. I mean, it's a spectrum, right?
I don't know what's worse.
Can I ask a question before we get too far away from the prologue? The original prologue.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Prologue 1. Do you think that Dr. Henry Jones Sr. and therefore his family are Mormons? Because they're in Utah in 1919 or whenever this is, 1912.
Yeah. I thought it was very weird. And I think I've never even thought about it until now. But it's established, a few minutes later in the movie that Professor Henry Jones Sr. is a professor, as dictated by his title.
Professor Doctor.
So, I'm trying to think of like in 1912, where would this medieval literature, are there schools in Utah? I'm treating it like it's fucking Old West. Like it's 1912. It's not 1712. Surely there's a school there. But the Mormons, when did the Mormons land in Utah though?
Land in Utah. It's like the late 1800s, right?
I know. I watched Under the Banner of Heaven and I learned absolutely nothing. They got there in 1847.
Okay. So, foothold
Well, maybe
established.
Indiana Jones 5 will be about finding those golden plates that Joseph Smith read. And, that'll be a fun adventure.
You can't see them.
No.
Yes.
Rules are rules.
Yes, they belong in a museum, but they will not go there.
I lost them. Sorry. By the way, you can't see them even when I'm dead because I lost them.
Everybody's lost but me. What do you think of that line?
River Phoenix does. I do like that line. I think this is what helps. I don't know if it's on purpose, but I think it's what helps Indiana Jones remain a character that I still really like, even though he could be like viewed through the same lens that like James Bond is viewed through, where it's like, this guy's a sexist pig. But I think the movie also sort of holds him at a distance a little bit. I think we talked about it in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The movie's not ashamed to watch him fail.
Yeah.
And I think the movie is aware that he's a little bit cocksure.
I think most of all in this movie, of the original trilogy, like this movie is celebrating and making fun of Indiana Jones at the same time.
Yes. He's very much, like many white men, failing upward constantly in this movie. Yeah, it's a very funny line, and River Phoenix does it well. Handpicked by Harrison Ford, because River Phoenix apparently looked like Harrison Ford when he was a kid. Two handsome men. They finally made it.
Handpicked by Harrison Ford. This child has been handpicked by Harrison Ford.
That seems weird now that you're pointing it out.
Let's not examine that any further.
By the way, just the post-prologue, I liked that.
Sections that exist in movies. Uh-huh.
I liked that we have it transitions from one prologue to the second by the Patrick Duffy lookalike putting the hat on River Phoenix, and then the Indiana Jones music swells like bum bum bum, very much like Superman or something, and it's interrupted by Indiana Jones getting punched in the face by one of these Tintin henchmen. So another way this movie's like, one, a comedy, I feel like set up fairly early up that this is going to be a little bit more a wackadoo, and also undercutting Indiana Jones' own prowess in his own post-prologue. Epi-prologue.
I feel like this is they do a really good job of that balance. I just want to point that out again because he is still cool. Like he's like slipping and getting punched and doing like, but he's also like, you're still like, there's no doubt that he's the adventurous hero of this movie. You're not also like this fucking doofus over here. You're like, that's really funny. And also I want one of those hats, please.
Right. It balances between like James Bond or like John McClane in the later Die Hard movies of just like being a Superman, but avoids like feeling like he's falling ass backwards into things, like a goofy bad spy movie or something. I couldn't think of a good
Goofy,
example.
For example, Goofy.
Like Goofy, being a divorced dad, trying to raise his kid, going to see Electro Man or whatever the fuck. You know the name of this character better than I from Goof Troop.
I'm just thinking of the power line.
Is that the name of the singer? Cut all this garbage.
Yeah. We don't need to talk too much about Goofy.
No, but I like that he is, it does a good job of balancing those two things.
Yeah. We bump forward to like him in the classroom again, kind of a callback to the first movie. And he's giving a speech to his class about how like, if you want to talk about philosophy, so-and-so's class is down the hall and X never ever marks the spot. And he also says, which is obviously going to very next scene, X marks the spot when they find the entrance to the Knight's Tomb. But he gives this whole speech about how archaeology is mostly in the library. And I wonder if that was like a response. Like, obviously it's a play on the fact that he does nothing like what real archaeology is. But I wonder if that was any sort of, like, I don't get a lot of defensiveness from it, but if it was like a nod to probably any criticism that the original movie or two have received from, like, what is this?
I feel like anytime in college, like if an archaeologist actually came to school and would talk to us, like the first thing they would have to disclose is like, now it's nothing like you've seen in your Indiana Jones movies. I'm like, we know.
Yeah.
We know that also crime fighting isn't like Batman. Just get on with the bones you brought or whatever.
Every time a police officer comes in, now we don't actually solve crimes.
We find someone who probably did the crime and we pin it on him. We decide what the narrative's going to be and then we get him.
You know, I'm not a big like, oh boy, can't say anything these days, cancel culture, blah, blah, blah. But also like this movie was like before like the discourse was what it is about movies. Like, so I imagine the complaints from archaeologists were probably kind of like fun complaints. You know what I mean? Where it was like that's not really how it is. And everyone, like you said, in Steven Spielberg's like,
yeah, we know. We know you don't fight Nazis. You'd probably be terrible in a fight with Nazis. And we know most of your work is done in the library. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it is a fun little moment because he undercuts himself, as you said, later in the scene. And I have nothing original to say there.
We got Grand Maester Pycelle.
I have that in my notes right here. Grand Maester Pycelle. Julian Glover gets to be a villain in almost every big franchise there is. He was a villain in Empire Strikes Back. He's a villain in this. He was a demi-villain in Game of Thrones, Grandmaster Pyrex.
You're right.
Grandmaster Pyrex.
It's a glass that you can heat.
That's what I like about it. Nigh indestructible. He's also, I think, in one of the Roger Moore James Bond movies. So...
Oh.
By the way, it took me forever. I think like by season 3 of Game of Thrones before I realized that this was Julian Glover in Game of Thrones as Grand Maester Pycelle.
It was the reverse for me. Having seen this after Game of Thrones, I was like, like I've seen this movie hundreds of times probably. I love this movie. And then seeing Game of Thrones and did not make the connection at all. Of course, he's, got the beard and stuff, but
he's got the beard and he's more older, of course. But he also like plays Pycelle as like very old, even though I think later it's revealed he's pretty spry. He just is playing
a guy playing old. He's playing an old guy playing older.
Yeah, he's an actor's actor. He plays Donovan, Walter Donovan. Charles Lindbergh type in that he is a Nazi sympathizer, not in that he crossed the Atlantic.
He might have.
That's true. We don't have any evidence that he didn't cross the Atlantic. He finds I guess he's been running an expedition in Venice. By the way, we at the audience and Indy do not know he's a Nazi sympathizer yet, but hold on to your seats. He finds some sort of tablet, and he's the one who delivers the line, your father's the one who's gone missing.
Dun, dun, dun.
I feel like I'm recapping again. Why am I losing the thread on this episode?
Because I did such a poor recap. You kind of have to. This is about the time when he's kind of going through the Grail stuff with Indiana that Lawrence said, my only problems with this movie are the biblical parts. As far as what to believe, like what is too hard to believe.
Well, luckily, like all Grail stuff, I remember as a kid being so disappointed that the Holy Grail isn't a biblical thing. It's just like, hey, there's a cup in this scene. What if the cup was something special? This is my impression of medieval English peasants. What if that's something we could find over there? It's ridiculous.
We know we need to name this after somebody. Arthurian, no. Jonathon, no. I was just trying to come up with other names.
Jonathon.
Jonathon.
Oh, I thought you said Jonathon like Jennifer. Like an F.
Jenniferian.
In this scene, though, with Walter Donovan, we do get a description of Sean Connery's character before we meet him, which I really appreciate. Indiana Jones says, he's a teacher of medieval literature, the one the students hope they don't get, which I appreciate. As a person who did actively root against getting certain teachers for classes.
Oh, yeah.
It gives you like an instantaneous like vibe of what Henry Jones Sr. will be like. And then we go to Venice.
Ah, Venice. That was a good bit. I knew that he said that, but I thought he only said it once. I didn't realize that was a bit because they get there and he says, Venice, which I remember quoting when I went to Venice. But then he says it when they come out of the tomb, out of the sewers, and he says, Venice. And then later on when he makes out with Elsa, he says it again. It's a good little bit.
As the gondolier goes by singing some sort of Italian opera. This is fun. I mean, I'm trying to think. This is our first foray into Europe in Indiana Jones. Is that right?
Yes.
We get to go to Venice. They have a little sexist moment where they're like, how are we going to recognize this Dr. Schneider when we see him? And then she's like, I am a woman. And then, and their monocles all fell out of their eye sockets and their hats spun on top of their heads. I told you it was a wackier movie than the previous two.
They really went for it, which I appreciate.
And then Harrison Ford goes like full tilt flirtation with Elsa Schneider, who is a very comely lass, as I like to say. And Marcus Brody, impersonating almost my entire teens and 20s, interrupts the flirtation to go, I hate to interrupt, but the reason why we're here...
They went super comedic with Brody in this movie, and I like it. I like this characterization.
It's an interesting way because you have this character that was in Raiders of the Lost Ark very briefly, but not really fleshed out. He sort of is an exposition machine in the first movie. And then he comes along here and slowly gets funnier and funnier. He's not particularly funny until a particular scene that I would like to wait until we discuss it. And there's a great transition to Marcus Brody being zany, but he definitely feels, at first it's like, well, why is Marcus Brody here? He gets sort of knocked unconscious at one point when they're in the catacombs, but he's a good way for, I guess, Indy to sort of play off of someone while keeping the Grail Diary a secret from Dr. Schneider. Wise move. In general, if it's 1939 and someone's name is Elsa Schneider, I'm not saying assume she's a Nazi, just be chill, I guess. Don't give her all the information just yet.
When they're in the library, they find through the map and then the markings on the stained glass, they find the X that leads them to the catacombs. And then Indiana is like slamming the stanchion on the ground. And it's one of my favorite bits of the movie was the librarian is also like very firmly stamping books. And it happens to coincide with his hits. And the librarian, I guess, thinks that this very loud sound coming from clearly farther away is his stamps. And it's a good physical comedy bit.
It's a good bit. And I mean, I think they do a good job. The first three, I think the shot is on him when he's stamping and then you hear the clanging in the distance and he looks at his stamp. But then we see Indiana Jones like hit it twice and then it cuts back to him just still staring at his thing, like as he has just stamped. It's very vaudevillian. I might be saying that just because the librarian who's doing the stamping has a very Groucho Marx style feel. Yes. But it is a good bit. It's very like silent movie, but I do get the giggles when it happens.
Yeah, it's pretty short. They don't spend too much time with it. And then my favorite thing is at the end, he just like puts it up on a book and then just sort of looks at it. Like... It's good. I mean, it's funny. Look, Damon, it's funny. Why are you mad at me about it? It's funny.
I mean, I would notice watching it, John Williams' score is very like, it's very staccato. It's like, we're
like first act Indiana Jones.
It's like bouncy, it's like you're jumping on logs in a river. I don't know why I would say that. I feel like especially having watched, we watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is Alan Silvestri in that one, but it has a lot of that same vibe, that cartoony vibe that keeps the action sort of bouncy and upbeat without ever feeling like, I don't ever feel like the stakes, I don't feel like the action is zany. I feel like the action sequences are pretty good in this. Great, even, one might say. But I feel like the music sort of keeps a balance of matching the tone of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's not, your dark and gritty adventure, but you do feel like it's creepy because you got the rats, they go in the catacombs and there's all these rats and then they get, what are the guys that are protecting the Grail?
The Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword.
I'm just going to call them the Knights Templar. They set the oil on fire, and so you're never like Indiana Jones. How is he going to get out of this one? Like, obviously he's going to get out of it, but it's still like, it's adventure. You are still like, there's a sense of stakes, and then I think the music does a good job of sort of balancing that. They're not having zero comedic beats during the adventure, but it's more of your like asides while they're letting the action kind of take the reins during those parts. And so there's still comedy, but there's still, that's like the big part of it. Whereas in the exposition parts, they're really leaning more into the comedy there, I think.
Even the action, I mean, there are sequences like later when we meet up with Sean Connery's character where there is comedy in those action sequences as well. You know, the biplane and, you know, the seagulls and...
That whole scene, oh man, we'll get to that. I feel like we're not...
I do want to point out one thing in this library before we get too far away. I don't know if you caught this. I caught it when I was a teen, and now I cannot re-immerse myself in this one shot. When he says, of course... When he sees the Roman numeral 10 on the floor and he says, X marks the spot. I get it, because I was here for earlier in the movie. But he's standing on like a balcony or a loft in that library, and there are books behind him. Did you catch this? That it's a fake bookcase?
Oh, no.
And it's lit bad so that you can see that the books are just like sort of like little rectangles that they've pasted on a black board. And I'm like... Guys, if you needed a bookcase, I can loan you a bookcase. Is it that hard to... I mean, you built a miniature tank that you drove off a cliff. You did all these things and you couldn't get like a bookcase and some books
for this put on one a balcony shot.
For this one like 5-second shot? It's so distractingly bad. And I wonder, it can't be just an HD problem because I remember noticing it as a teen. I think they were just like banking on the fact that no one was gonna notice this thing. But little did they know, I had very few friends in high school. And all I had to do was watch a movie 6 or 7 times. So look out!
I didn't notice that, but that's one of those things where you see it once and then you remember it. Like in Batman Returns when Danny DeVito as the Penguin like bumps a tombstone and it moves and it's clearly like made of styrofoam. I can't not see it. I see it all the time. Don't say Nazi.
Or do. It's the one of the few times you can while we're talking about this.
They end up trying to get Dr. Jones Sr. They end up in a castle along the Austrian-Germany border. And
the Australian-German border, yeah.
I can't do it. I can't not say Australia.
Get different names.
Thank you for realizing that this is Austria and Australia's fault and not mine for just not saying them slightly
I'm here to
different.
Support you.
But did we get a very good bit where Indiana pretends to be a Scottish tapestry curator or something?
They switch hats.
Yeah.
Him and Elsa switch hats.
And my favorite thing about that scene is Elsa, actually. So Indiana / Harrison Ford's fake Scottish accent is very funny, and it's meant to sort of be over the top because even
he's playing Lord Clarence MacDonald.
Yeah,
is the name of the Scottish lord that he is,
and even the butler doesn't buy it. It's so over the top, but it gets.
It's absolutely pointless. It accomplishes nothing except literally getting in the front door, which they probably could have done in their normal clothes. They probably just could have just open the door and push their way through, but it gets them like 10 feet in. But the whole sequence, Elsa is like has no idea what's happening. She's wearing Indiana's hat and jacket. It's very oversized. She keeps slipping on the wet floor and she keeps smiling very awkwardly. And it's very funny. And see, my lovely assistant, and he pulls her forward and she almost bites it. Right on the God, great. I think that is one of my favorite parts of this movie. Just that whole quick sequence. We actually watched it twice because This is a castle. And we have many tapestries. But if you are a Scottish lord, then I am Mickey Mouse. That butler, first off, so mad, just starts at a 10. Absolutely. Just, first off, furious seemingly that there might be an insinuation that they don't have any tapestries. Right. Despite the fact that when he's punched, he lands on a tapestry.
You're looking right at one, bud.
It is sort of zany. One of the things I appreciate about all the Indiana Jones movies in general is that they all sort of tap into an adventure type trope that you assume has happened in all these other Indiana Jones movies. But in essence, like, this is the first time that he's actually tried to impersonate a character of his own design. Like, sometimes he'll put on a coat to sort of blend in.
Yeah, they do that.
Like,
and
put on a Nazi
movie.
uniform. Yeah. But this is the first time where he's like, I'm going full Bugs Bunny. Yeah. And I'm going to pretend I'm someone else. I feel like there's at least one sequence in each Indiana Jones movie where I'm like, have they not done this in another movie? Or is this just like an adventure movie trope that is like instilled into my brain, like the minecart chase? I'm like, this is the first minecart chase?
It feels weird. Like we've done this. Yeah. Yeah, it's so great.
And I do love that it's I mean, if it was a lesser movie, I would be annoyed that it is absolutely pointless. It's one of those things like, if you're enjoying the movie, it's fun. If you're not enjoying the movie, it would annoy you.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, I'm enjoying the movie, so it is fun to watch Harrison Ford, who I think is a very good actor, but he's not a Meryl Streep type. He's not disappearing into a role. He's a Cary Grant type, where it's like, you want this type of person? Hire this guy, because he's going to do the pointing, he's going to do the angry face. I didn't kill my wife! Like, that's what you're getting. Seeing him try and do a Scottish accent, it's so terrible. I also appreciate the almost meta comment, Nazis, I hate these guys. Like, thank you for clarifying your point. That scene with Elsa, that first, like, I watched it this time knowing that Elsa probably knows this butler. She probably knows all these people.
She's playing along.
And so she's almost like playing along while also sort of hinting at the butler that she is embarrassed that she is playing along. And I feel like that's part of the funniness of that scene, is that she is trying to play it both ways, where like telling the butler, like, just go along with it. Yeah. And trying to be, playing this faux assistant to this faux Scottish lord. And also, I mean, that continues when they're going down the hallways of this German castle. And he goes, he's in here, like pointing to a door. And she goes, how do you know? Almost like, not, oh, he is, but she's just like, just out of curiosity, how do you know for sure that he's in there? And he's like, because it's bugged or because it's wired. It's a fun thing to re-examine.
His whole early interactions with Elsa, up to the point where he discovers that she's a Nazi, are, if you watch it again, knowing that, like, of course you do, like, upon a multi-rewatch like this is, it does, like, add layers to her character that aren't there if you watch it the first time, because she's playing him this whole time, and he's acting like, come with me, toots, and like when he decides to swing out and swing back into the room that his dad's being held captive in, she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, this is what it's like, this is child's play or something like that. And meanwhile, she's like, this fucking guy. Like,
meanwhile, when the German officers burst into like Sean Connery's room, it's because, I mean, in retrospect, it's because she told them, like, hey, these fuckers are in the room together. Go get them.
Yeah.
By the way, the younger one has the fucking Grail diary on him.
Right. I love it so much. What I'm saying I love it so much is I'm anticipating this next part, which is when we finally get Sean Connery. And from the very beginning, like, just sets it up. We've already, like, seen, the silhouette of Henry Jones, and we've, like, heard about him when Indiana's talking to someone else about him, but this is the first time we get, and the first thing he does is bash his son over the head with a vase, and then also when he recognizes him, he goes, Junior, and Indiana Jones goes, yes, sir, because he's, like, basically concussed by this vase. Oh, and he immediately reverts, and the whole adventure with his dad is like him regressing, basically.
Absolutely.
And what a brilliant idea for this character. It's just another way of comedically undercutting him, though, which we've talked about enjoying very much, is because, like, we both see where, like, all his pathos comes from, and also, like, he's, like, still kind of acting like a kid. Like, he's the one that's going to rescue his dad, and he does. He, like, does very, like, brave, adventurous things and gets him out of this pickle while also being browbeaten by his father the whole time.
Held hostage by Nazis. A pickle.
It's a bit of a pickle.
Okay, we've got ourselves into one of our classic shenanigans. Let's see how they get out of this one.
As our own country slowly declines into fascism, I'm like, this is a bit of a pickle for those of us.
Our country is slowly devolving into a real big pickle. No, you're absolutely, I mean, that is the big theme of this movie, because, I mean, once Elsa is like a really great 3-card Monty in that she's immediately like removed from the thing. I mean, the movie sort of like dangles her along as like she's a little bit more complicated than maybe just being a Nazi stooge.
Yeah. She cries when they're burning books. She's a doctor,
I mean, I guess she can't be all bad.
I mean, evil people like to read too.
The regression is really great, and Harrison Ford plays it really great. I mean, the yes, sir, I feel like not only like plays up that regression, but also connotes an idea of what their relationship was like, which is, I remember being at friends' houses who had fathers that insisted on them calling them sir.
Yeah.
And I found that very odd. My relationship with my father is not a yes, sir, no, sir type deal. And I'm always discomforted by people whose relationships with their fathers are yes, sir, no, sir.
Well, it's always weird when it's played off of the fact that they're like, you're like, hello, Mr. Johnson. And they're like, call me Terry. And you're like, no, this is complicated, this dynamic. I don't want to be any part of it.
You're going to be Mr. Johnson until the day either I or you die. But there's even like a scene like later on when they're running from the Nazis, when all these Nazi planes are flying around and shooting at them. Like Indiana Jones is exasperated by the fact that, Sean Connery's taking too long to get out of a car. And he's like, Dad, he's coming back. He says it like just a bratty teen.
Because he also goes, what? Like, so good.
And then there's a sweet scene on the Hindenburg. I assume the Hindenburg, it might just be any Nazi blimp, any old Nazi blimp, where they have like a back and forth. And I mean, they're both very charming, and you can very much see how their personalities just both were at fault. Although I would give the points to Indiana Jones, the child, like he could have used a father figure. But, when Sean Connery says, you left just when you were becoming interesting, I was like, that sounds like me as a father, honestly, because I don't want anything to do with children. I definitely don't want anything to do with teenagers. But when they became adults, I'd, want to talk to them and get to know them. But
it's just a real fucked
the idea
up thing
of a child leaving, like abandoning his father, is described as you left just when you were becoming interesting. So it's on you, buddy.
This is the first time I adore that scene, and I think of it often. And this is the first time
the Hindenburg or the actual rescue scene?
I thought you were talking about the actual Hindenburg disaster. I was like, no, I wasn't thinking of that. Saying I adore this scene.
Oh, the humanity! You said
that they're displaying in this conversation. No, the father-son conversation. This is the first time watching it back that I was actually thinking of River Phoenix as young Indiana Jones, and that he probably, we don't really know, but that he probably did leave not long after we saw him, when he was like not quite, now we think of now when you're like 18 and you finish school and you kind of, there's like a set time for a lot of people when you leave and go do the next thing. And he probably, he obviously went and got into academics and stuff, but like you could see him leaving when he was like 15 or 16, being like, fuck this.
Yeah.
Especially with like, as like a cocksure young, adventure loving teen, I guess.
Adventure loving teen.
I wasn't one of those, so I don't know what they do.
No, I hate adventure. I'm very much Bilbo Baggins in the first chapter of the book. Get out of here, old man.
Just smoking a pipe in the Shire. Can we just talk about Sean Connery for a minute?
Yeah, I wanted to get into that rescue scene and just Sean Connery overall.
Yeah.
Wife beater, we covered it in the intro.
Yeah, and we talked about it before.
Caveat.
Acknowledged and shamed.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the escape from the blimp, or which part?
The rescue actually from the Castle Brunwald, that first scene where we meet Sean Connery. We learn he is scared of rats. And we learn that he's very concerned about Ming vases over his son's cranial health. It's fake. You can see from the cross sections. I also like another sort of vaudevillian scene is when these Nazis come in and they say, Dr. Jones, and they both say yes in unison. Yes. Charming. And they're like, hand over the diary or hand over the book. And they're like, what book? Again, playing it cool. And then Sean Connery sort of realizes that they're talking about the Grail diary. He's like, do you really think my son would be that stupid to bring my diary all the way back here? And realizes, again, Harrison Ford regressing, like, I mean, this is the first time Indiana Jones fails constantly, but this is the first time like he looks legitimately like ashamed. He's like, and he goes, you didn't, did you? You did. I should have mailed it to the Marx Brothers. But then also, I think, again, like, you know, Indiana Jones, they bicker back and forth who's on first. And then they shoot. Indiana Jones steals a machine gun from a Nazi and shoots them. And as a kid, I was very disturbed. There's a pink something that flies off of one of them. And I'm like, that must be an accident. But it looks like he's getting, his brains are coming out. Sean Connery goes, look what you did. Yeah. I can't believe what you did. Offended by the murder, which, I mean, yeah, it's disturbing to see someone killed.
He says that something before. What's he later? He says, they're shooting at us. Like, I know, Dad. And he's like, it's a new experience for me.
It happens to me all the time.
New experience for me. He is also like, so we learned that they have both slept with Elsa. That's also how Elsa got the original Dr. Jones in this. And when he realizes that, he's like, yeah, she talks in her sleep. And then he just kind of looks at her and he gives this Sean Connery's cheeky little grin. Just like, it's not like slimy or anything. It's just a funny, like, little beat he does. I mean, this is the funniest that Sean Connery has ever been in that I've ever seen. Like, he's so
At least
funny.
On purpose.
Yes.
I mean, Finding Forrester is funny, but it doesn't seem like it's on purpose. You're the man now, dog. I never know what to do, because I've heard this, again, might be apocryphal, but I've heard that is like a improvised line that got worked into the plot.
You're the man now, dog?
That was going to be in this movie, but they were like, that makes no sense.
Why would you say that?
Let's save it for a different movie. There's just like an assistant writing down random things that Sean Connery says and hoping that they will eventually be shoehorned into some script. The sleeping with Elsa thing, because it seems to like go against his like very staid, like nerdy, buttoned up vibe that Sean Connery's Henry Jones Sr. is giving.
He's very handsome, though.
He is very handsome. I think more this time watching it, his character gets by on a lot of charm more than cohesion in the end, because they're even in like the motorcycle scene where they are escaping from this castle. Sean Connery is in the scene, depending on what's happening, he is both excited by his son's ingenuity in dispatching Nazis and also sort of put out and rather just wind up his watch rather than like engage in complimenting his son. It's a weird back and forth for this character. And so the sleeping with Elsa thing feels like Sean Connery being like, well, he's not going to be a total nerd, right? He still fucks, right?
See, I didn't see that in the motorcycle chase, because what I saw is like him reacting to like immediate things happening, motorcycles flipping over, and then him actually reacting to what his son has done. Part of it is probably genuine like horror at all these people that are dying, whether they're Nazis or not. It's still awful to see. And then also
just blew up.
Also not wanting to sort of condone the violence, even though it's like justified in this case. He's just like, and he's obviously very withholding. So it's like that's how I saw it, is like his like whoa kind of stuff was just because that he was physically being thrown around.
You might be right. He does smirk like when Indiana Jones takes that surprisingly flimsy flagpole and jousts one of the henchmen, but then later on is put out. But that's when Indiana Jones is looking at him like for approval, and he doesn't give it. So you might be right that like his initial reaction is like, "Ooh, good, we're not gonna be killed by Nazis." Right. But now that the danger is past, I'm not gonna give you the validation you so desperately seek, Junior. Before we get too far, because I'm trying to, this is the first time that I actually tried to figure out what was the Nazis' plan here. Here's what I've pieced together. And see if this makes sense to you. They hired Henry Jones Sr. Mm-hmm. He fucked Elsa. She talked in her sleep, revealing herself to be a National Socialist. And then they kidnapped him because now he knew they were Nazis and he was no longer compliant. is that why would they kidnap him when they already hired him to do the work? And he was doing the work. Seemingly, he was going to libraries and, trying to find knights' tombs.
Yeah, he discovered that. And then, you kind of have to fill in the blanks here, but I think that he immediately mailed his diary away. So they were like, okay, where's the diary? And he had already gotten rid of it. And so at that point, they just decided to hold him hostage. Like, there's some like step
as a bait
three
to get Indiana
there.
Jones to come. Right?
Yes. Yeah, I think
as
so.
like a carrot on a stick for Indiana Jones, like get him roped in.
Yeah. Well, at first they probably didn't know that right away. They just knew like he had the diary, got rid of it. They probably assumed he had it. And then when they realized he didn't, they're like, okay, well, we're just going to hold you hostage until we can figure this out. And then when they realized,
we're not going to kill you, we're just going to hold you hostage. I have another question. This has bugged me ever since this movie came out. Why would Steven Spielberg or the casting agent, whatever, hire someone to play the Nazi tertiary villain, Colonel Vogel, who is like, he looks exactly like D-Day hero Dwight D. Eisenhower to me. He looks exactly.
Until you realize he's blonde.
Confusing. Well, I think Dwight D. Eisenhower even had like light hair. Like if you look at those old pictures of Normandy, like it's confusing. Don't hire people who look like people who killed Nazis to play Nazis.
It's confusing in this movie on the Nazi tank. You keep going, what is Dwight D. Right.
No, is that Dwight D. Eisenhower? Is that?
Famously in many movies, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Do you think this was after he got sick and Nixon had to assume the presidency for a few weeks and then maybe he filmed the movie in the meantime? Oh, he was long dead by then? Still pretty confusing to old little Damon.
Our situation has not improved.
Okay, so also as we're leaving Castle Brunwald, this is I wrote it down in toto because this may be one of my favorite transitions in a movie. The Nazis, we are now have revealed that Elsa is a double-crosser, that Walter Donovan is a double-crosser. Multiply them together, that's a quadruple cross. And they realize that a map has been torn out of the diary. And Walter Donovan says, we must have these pages back. And Elsa says, you're wasting your breath. He's not going to tell us. But he doesn't have to, because he's given them to Marcus Brody. And they're like, oh, we just need to get him. And Indiana Jones says, he's got a 2-day head start, which is more than he needs. He has friends in every town and village from here to the Sudan. He speaks a dozen languages, knows every local custom. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again. With any luck, he has the Grail already. And then we cut to Marcus Brody in Iskenderun, screaming in a marketplace, does anyone here speak English or even ancient Greek?
Just completely lost.
Completely lost.
The sorest thumb. Like, he's just sticking out so much. I love that transition. And that's like a good example of, it's not exactly subtle, but it's a good way of using the direction itself for comedy. Like that is a funny edit, which you don't really think about.
It's a slow pan into Harrison Ford's face.
Yeah.
And so it feels very, legitimate. Again, we haven't seen Marcus Brody. I mean, he's sort of been a third wheel, but he hasn't been,
Yeah, he's not
like underdog or something. He's not like slipping on banana peels. Why did I call him banana peels? The Italian. We're in Venice, of course.
Venice.
So it's a great transition it's not completely out of character. It's like hinted at, but he's not been a complete
moron
dupe. It's a great transition. And then later, when they're rushing to get ahead of the Nazis, Henry Jones Sr. says, I thought you said, he had a head start. He had more than he needs. He's like, oh, Marcus, he got lost once in his own museum.
Yeah. We also get some good comedy from Sala, who finds him, and then
The Return of Sala.
When they're confronted
the original
by
subtitle
Nazis.
to this. Indiana Jones in The Return of Sala.
Indiana Jones and Sala in.
They're a twosome now.
They get a good kind of physical and comedy bit when Sala's kind of looking for his papers, and he just goes, yeah, they're right here, run. And then he just keeps saying it, run. And then Marcus is not getting it at all.
Yeah, he's completely clueless. I also want to point out some physical comedy in that. These two men who definitely are Nazis just from the look of them.
Yes. They shopped at Nazis R Us.
They got the uniforms for the henchmen at the henchman store. They come right up to Marcus Brody and they start talking to him about the museum in Iskenderun. But the Nazi does a quick little bow, and Denholm Elliott, who plays Marcus, does a quick he backs away. He pivots at the hip to back away. So it forms this almost like magnet of moving back and forth like windshield wipers. Just really quick. It's a really quick physical comedy. It makes me giggle every time.
Yeah.
I like it when things work like that.
It's very funny. And then there's so much. There's so much rapid fire, no pun intended, comedy in this bit, because we also get, so the Jones boys are tied back to back in chairs, and then he's like, Dad, can you get the lighter out of my pocket? And then he goes to light the rope on fire to try to get them on, and of course he burns himself and then throws it, and then the rug catches on fire, and Dr. Henry Jones keeps calmly says, the floor's on fire. See? And the chair. Oh, God. And then another favorite bit from that. This is probably the thing that makes me laugh the most consistently watching this movie is, and it's such a stupid little thing, because again, they're tied back to back. They're still tied up. And
the ropes are perfectly evenly, they don't cross each other. They are perfectly even with each other. They run parallel in a very comically
yes,
symmetrical tie-up job.
It's very cartoonish in a very Three Stooges, Marx Brothers kind of thing too. He's trying to get his attention and goes, Dad, and then he looks around the other way, and then they just do a back and forth. Dad, what?
Dad, what?
Dad,
Dad,
what?
what?
Dad. And of course, the urgency is the whole room's on fire, and just the juxtaposition of those two things, and then they end up finding a secret passageway through the fireplace to just basically a Nazi control room. Oh my God. The whole scene, it makes me laugh every time. It's very good.
I'll add to that. I will go ahead, if we're just recounting parts we liked and laughed at, is as they're leaving that castle, Indiana Jones sees some boats tied up to a dock. He jumps onto a boat, starts the motor running, and his father throws his bag to Indy, and Indy throws it back and says, no, we're not taking a boat. And he gets off the boat and walks off scene or off camera. And Sean Connery's like, we're not getting in the boat. What about the boat? They're very funny people. These two men are very funny people together. And the script is also funny, which makes them funny.
Well, we're still just lauding Sean Connery with compliments. So they end up in the blimp, and then the Nazis figure out what's going on and turn the blimp around, and they take the airplane that's flying the blimp away.
No. It's just an escape plane.
But doesn't it launch them? Isn't that how it works? But then the blimp controls can take over.
I don't know about how Zeppelins work, but there's a control little pod under the what have you. I thought it was just an escape plane. Is this how they launch up into the air? There's a little biplane underneath and rolls along and then zooms up. I've never seen a blimp take off.
It does not matter for the purpose of this. I don't really know.
Is this why the Hindenburg went down?
They're like, our plane, you got to give that back.
We need that for some reason.
The fighter planes come after them, and Henry has to take the gunner position. And of course, he shoots their tail on accident.
How does that not happen more often? When I see this movie every time, I'm like, I would totally do that.
Yeah. This is also the movie where I learned the 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, because he explains it very quickly and urgently when his dad checks his watch. And being all of 7 years old when this came out, and I was like, oh, okay. But he accidentally shoots the tail, and then Indiana goes, are we hit? And he goes, son, I'm sorry. They got us. It's very good.
All right, well, let's just keep going. I just want to say one of my favorite lines in this movie, there's actually two from Sean Connery, mostly because I get to say them in his voice. Later, when they're being bombarded, now they're on the ground, they've stolen a car, the car's been bombed.
That car belonged to my brother-in-law.
Different car, first car.
Okay.
They're still being hunted by a bunch of planes, right when Indy says, he's coming back.
Yeah.
Sean Connery sees a flock of birds. He gets his little umbrella that he's been carrying this entire time. He has an umbrella in his bag, and he scares the birds away. It forces the plane to crash. And he says, I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne. Let my armies be the rocks and the trees, the birds in the sky. There's so many S's in that it's fun to say in Sean Connery's voice.
Is your other favorite quote the goose-stepping morons?
It tells me that goose-stepping morons like yourselves. I like the aside, like yourselves, just in case you weren't sure who the goose-stepping morons were. It's you, like yourselves, should try reading books instead of burning them. I do like that. It took me a while. I think I was watching this with my mom once, on a Saturday afternoon. Again, I had no friends in high school. So I was watching movies with my mom on a Saturday afternoon. And we saw the scene where they're trying to get the provincial leader of Hatay to allow them to, search for the Grail in Turkey. And they bring this chest full of gold and jewels and wares. And Donovan says they were donated by some of the finest families in Germany. And then later on, the king of Hatay goes on and talks about the Rolls Royce or whatever. But my mom, when they say that, when they were donated by the finest families in all of Germany, she goes, yeah, right. And I realized
they've looted
they were stolen from Jewish families who were sent to the camps.
That makes that not as fun.
Not as fun.
But it does make you realize.
But it is a little historical Easter egg, I guess, in there.
Fun fact, Nazis committed atrocities.
Now that's interesting. Put that in the movie.
Okay, are you still going on?
I'm done. I feel like I've lost him. I've done all my Sean Connery now.
We're named the dog Indiana.
No, that's pretty good too, yeah. Henry Jones Jr. The pointing at himself for Henry Jones and then pointing at Jr.
It's very good. Sala, for being in this for very little time, has some good lines because when the second car explodes, he goes, "That car belonged to my brother-in-law."
And he says, "Sala, that's 5 camels. I said no camels. Can't you count?" And he's like, "Compensation for my brother-in-law's car."
The first line too is really funny when you think about it. You're like, you picked 5. I said 0. Just to kind of dial it back a little bit, I feel like we've been heaping a little bit too much praise on this.
Yeah, let's run this through the ringer.
This movie has...
Give him hell!
One of the cringiest sequences of all times, and it's very quickly, luckily, which is when Indiana re-encounters Elsa at the sort of Nazi rally outside of wherever they are at this point, when they go back to Berlin to get the book.
There's more in the diary than just the map.
He threatens her and he's holding her neck. And he says, "All I have to do is squeeze. All I have to do is scream." And I hate it. It's a very
line. Cringy scene.
It's very soap opera, the worst kind of Days of Our Lives sequence. And that's it.
It's awkward. It's shoehorned in. There's a weird, I feel like the movie does set up this map as a mini MacGuffin, but the diary is the main MacGuffin and no one really appreciates everything else that's in the diary outside of the map. And we do get to have Hitler sign the diary in a very awkward scene that I still kind of like because it's weird. He's stolen a Nazi officer's uniform and he gets roped into all these children who are trying to get Hitler's autograph. And then he's the only adult standing there. And then, of course, the dramatic irony of Hitler has this thing that he may or may not be aware all his officers are trying to get their hands on. And he signs it and hands it back to Indiana Jones. Yeah, it's an awkward scene. Apparently there's someone playing Leni Riefenstahl in that scene, filming the entire proceedings. When I was going through the IMDb and there was a woman in the cast listed as Leni Riefenstahl. I was like, what? There's a woman filming that scene and it would be Leni Riefenstahl, the famous propagandist for the Nazis. More historical Easter eggs for everyone. That's something for the people who watch the History Channel, but only in the 90s, not when it got all alien-y.
Luckily, that's followed by a much better scene, which is the whole Zeppelin sequence. And then no ticket, which I really do like. Okay, so let's talk about the third act, where I feel like we're there. Oh, well, we got the whole tank sequence. I don't think there's much to say other than Dwight D. Eisenhower. He does his own stunts, which I thought was pretty cool.
It's nice for a 4-star general to get out there. 5-star general? I can't remember with Dwight D. Eisenhower. Give him an extra star.
We're going to give him 6. But I kind of want to zip past the tank thing because I feel like we've said enough overall.
It's well done. I mean, you don't need us to tell you how a action sequence, even though you've been listening, theoretically, up until this point, we're not going to explain it for you.
There's the kind of Indiana Jones's death fake out, and it's actually, at first you're kind of like, this is kind of silly. Of course Indiana Jones isn't dead, but we get some actual real emotion from his father for the first time. Like, not the first time, but like, it kind of reinforces the sort of slightly softer Henry Jones that we got on the blimp. And we get...
Come see the softer side, Sean.
Because he thought he died, and he was excited to see him. He gives him a real hug, and Indiana Jones is like almost dead. He's been, I don't know, stabbed and shot and whipped, and his head like on the track of a tank. And his dad gives him a hug, and he like leans into it for a moment, and it's a really sweet moment.
Melts into the hug, and it's very charming. Of course, I mean, immediately after the hug, Sean Connery goes back to cool demeanor. Withholding.
What are you resting for?
We're so near to the end. But it is a very sweet moment, and I think they both play it very well. And then we get to Petra.
So this is a really memorable... I feel like this is the part of the movie. Now, there are always memorable stuff, but like speaking as a trilogy as a whole, the Indiana Jones, I feel like the final act is kind of where it starts to always be like, gets a little like off the rails, sometimes literally in Temple of Doom. But like this one is like... such a strong, like, I remember like this whole sequence, the whole going through the trials, and the volunteer who I'm sure didn't actually volunteer, who gets his head chopped off.
The Nazis have a very specific definition of volunteer.
And then of course like the stakes of Henry having been shot, and then whispering like the penitent man. Like I always remember that. And then any of the like J, when he thinks Jehovah starts with J. But of course, we all know that in the Latin alphabet, Jehovah starts with an I.
So the J's there just as a goof, apparently. Just the Crusaders or God himself just having a laugh.
There's also like a semicolon just to be like, you're never going to use this properly.
Maybe you'd put an emoticon at the end. Like, Jehovah, wink. I remember being like really creeped out by the blades as a kid. First off, like, is God sharpening them? Who set up the temple? Is it the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, presumably? Yeah. Or is it God himself? Is he coming down like every 2 weeks to make sure the blades are sharpened? I do like that brief shot when he steps through J and you see the pit below him and you can see like cutouts of the stones from underneath.
Yeah.
It's really weird, like obviously a matte painting or something, but it's always is very striking to me. It's not often you get to see the back end, the behind the scenes look of all these temples and, booby traps that have been standing and functioning for 700 years. Little behind the curtain there. That's fun. I did appreciate that it was an open book exam for the three booby traps, that he was able to, that the professor said he could bring his textbook. That's nice.
He's not a normal professor. He's a cool professor.
He's a cool professor. He knows you've got a lot of things. Finals can be really stressful. Hey, call me Greg. So
we also get, when it gets there, we get our gruesome death because
we do. We had rats early on. That was our
creature,
numerous animal, and then we get our gruesome death finally at the end of this.
Yeah. What's Pycelle's name? What's his character's name again?
Walter Donovan.
Yeah, Donovan. Of course, he chose poorly, so he melts, ages very quickly. It's kind of similar to the melting face of in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's more like he
decomposes in real time rather than melts away.
But there's lots of screaming, and and he like won't let go of Elsa.
Right. His grip and his vocal cords still going great,
still good,
despite rotting away in front of us. I remember I was very terrified of this scene until my brother said, "It's weird that his head gets bigger as it's decomposing." And then I watched it, and I was like, "Yeah, it is weird." And then I was never scared of it again. Like that broke the spell. I'm like, yeah, because they're just putting stuff on it. They're just adding things as it rots away.
And they forgot to zoom out.
I feel really bad for Gerard or whatever this French knight's name is. First off, I want to hand it to him. It's been 700 years. He's apparently kept up with his languages. He speaks perfect modern English once they arrive. So good on you. It's good to study. keep up with the kids. What are the kids saying these days? Probably, he follows a bunch of people on TikTok. He doesn't post. He just follows people on TikTok and just wants to see what the trends are.
I would like to try this McDonald's.
I feel bad for him. I mean, first off, he's the only guy working at the Grail showroom that day. And 3 people come in an afternoon after 700 years of no one.
What a rush.
Ooh. It's just like, look, you guys keep looking around. I just want to talk to him real quick. Find some things you like, and I'd love to come over to talk to you about purchase options.
Sharon was supposed to come in. She called in sick this morning. And by this morning, I mean 300 years ago.
Cassie's on break. I mean, legally I have to give her 30 minutes, but I know it's been 45 and she does this every fucking day. So I feel bad for him in that regard.
Cassie quiet quit on me. It's really frustrating.
The idea is, as he lays it out to us, this is the fine print, is that, yes, the Grail gives you immortal life, but you have to stay in the temple. You can't leave. And you also assume his role of sitting there guarding the Grail? I'm a little confused because the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword is fighting to keep everyone away from the Grail.
But he's like waiting for someone.
He appreciates that? Because he's like, hey, I need someone to take my shift so I can fucking die.
I've been holding this pee for 500 of these 700 years.
I mean, I know that I can probably go to the back and pee, but that's going to be the time that a knight or a quester comes in here.
And also, I've just got this one room. I don't really want to live in my pee.
It raises a lot of questions. But also at the end, as the temple is being destroyed, he salutes Indiana Jones.
Yeah, a little wave.
And then Indiana and his dad run out the front door.
They're like, and fuck this guy, let's get out.
Spielberg chooses to cut back to the knight as he slowly lowers his hand and looks quite forlorn.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Because now the Grail is gone. I don't know if he gets it magically back and is guarding it again, but either way, the temple is now destroyed, so there's no way to get in there.
I feel like God will, fix it up again. That's my understanding, is like...
He comes in on Sundays to oil the blades.
Yeah.
So
he's like, I don't have to do this, and I don't need the money. I just like doing it, is the thing. I like the idea of people getting their heads chopped off just to look for a cup that my brother's blood was in. And or that he served wine out of?
Your brother? His brother?
Did I say brother?
Yeah, God's brother Jesus.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
He's
not only his brother and his son, but he's also himself.
Yeah.
Christianity, come on.
This all checks out. Don't read into it too much. Or do.
I have another question for you. Did Elsa intend to kill Donovan?
No, I don't think so. That's not the impression I got. I think she was...
That was always my impression until this viewing, and it cuts to her a few times where I'm like, hey, girl, what you doing? You got a plan here? Because she sort of like has a demure, like where she looks down at the ground, and as he's saying, this truly is the cup of the King of Kings, or whatever he says. And she's like, she giggles behind her hand.
And then twirls. She grows a mustache, then twirls it.
Then she pulls out a carrot from the back pocket and she says, ain't I a stinker? And it's like, Elsa,
something's up. Something's up here.
Something's going on here.
So here's how I read that. I read that as her being sort of fearful, as like even though she's clearly like in cahoots with them, she's not a full Nazi. We've kind of seen these hints.
She's a demi-Nazi, is what you're saying.
Yeah, she actually does have some affection for Indiana, and she is sad about books. That's about all we get of like her, like what her real feelings are. And what I read this as is like, I've enabled this to happen, and now this evil guy has the power of eternal life.
So you're saying she's sort of like the Marsha Blackburn to Walter Donovan's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene's full Nazi, but right. Marsha Blackburn's just in it for the money. You know what I mean?
And like when no one's looking, she's probably like, I don't know if I should have done that.
Actually, I hope no one finds out I did that.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't read that as she's trying to pull a fast one, because I don't think she knows.
Right. I guess you might be right. That's how I've always interpreted, but this time I felt like I feel like she might be trying to kill Donovan, but if she is, I don't feel like the movie has given her a lot of moments of like, I wonder if these Nazis are really all they're cracked up to be, but never really. I mean, I feel like because it's just her and Donovan at the end, if that were the case, if she is intentionally trying to kill him, that
would have been a lot easier ways to do it. She could have pushed him off of the walk of the leap of faith.
Yeah, just push him into one of those blades just jutting out of the floor. Make him stand on the J. Just see ya.
Or so many other letters too.
Yeah, the semicolon, the interrobang.
The word of Bahova.
There is this scene. I mean, I like this a little bit, but there's always something that annoys me. He goes, "That's the cup of a carpenter." And he grabs this sort of very demure wooden, petrified wood cup. Don't put your lips on it. It's just been sitting out, but it's still gold lined. Like the actual bowl of the chalice is lined with gold. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, still a well-to-do carpenter though, right?
Yeah.
Like he still had a bunch of molten gold on hand.
Yeah, but I mean, we all know that that's in the Bible, that the blood of Jesus turns things to gold.
That's true. And also, I mean, you have to remember that Jesus is the ultimate trust fund kid. So yeah, he's making wooden chalices, but he's dipping into his trust fund to line them with gold.
I could be thinking of the alien from Aliens and their blood is acid. I think that's what I'm thinking of. My fault. Okay, that's the movie. And then our heroes literally ride off into the sunset.
Well, we get our Lord of the Rings moment where, they drop the chalice into the crevasse and they fight over it, Schmeagol style. Yeah. Indiana.
See, he shows him respect for his choices. He didn't dead name him.
He called him by his dumb name. Yeah. He didn't dead name him.
Aren't you sad that you taught me these things?
He didn't dead name him. Although later he calls him Junior once again, which is definitely like, oh, sorry, I forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can't keep up with these pronouns.
The dog? Damon.
Hi.
What is your verdict?
This is a very fun movie. It's very funny. We can't stop, quoting parts that we like. It's got great action sequences. It's got great repartee. In watching it this time, I felt like, is this movie an overcorrection to... You could see it as an overcorrection to Temple of Doom, which was really dark. You might argue too dark. I would argue too racist. But it brings back Sala from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It brings back a more globe-trotting adventure rather than in Temple of Doom where you sort of land in India and you're in India for the rest of the movie. It's much more like following clues like Raiders of the Lost Ark was. So I could see how it has like almost, you could view it as a Rise of Skywalker, like overcorrection, like, oh, we got to go back to the thing that people liked. But people sometimes are right. And the things that they liked were the things that worked, and the things they didn't like were the racist anti-Hindu parts. So I think this is a lot of fun. I think it gets rid of a lot of the problematic parts of especially Temple of Doom, but also, I mean, it's not as problematic even as Raiders of the Lost Ark, as we talked about some of our quibbles with that movie and how it treats Egyptians. It's fun to punch Nazis, and this movie's got that in spades. It's just a fun, light-hearted adventure. I think that the elements of the father-son, you have the regression of Harrison Ford's character, Indiana Jones, is fun to watch. Harrison Ford plays it really well. Sean Connery playing against type is also fun to watch. Fun to watch him playing this guy who doesn't want any part in adventures, is offended by people being shot up by machine guns, and doesn't seem to be able to hold his own against his more adventurous son. It's great to see these two characters or actors play against each other. But yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, what can you say? It works really well because it's so good. Your child's not an idiot.
Once again, you bring no value to the table. You have no good points. And I agree with you 100%. Your inner child is not an idiot. This movie's great. And I think you could find some quibbles, like the one sequence that I really don't like. Elsa could be a little bit more. We could dig into Elsa a little bit more and get more, especially as the like only female character in this entire movie. The way that we got away from racism is just by having almost zero people of color in the movie, which is like, well, that's one way to do it. And I would argue that it worked better because you're just stepping away from the problem areas. But it is other than Sala, we don't really have, and the volunteer.
Still played by a Welsh guy.
Yes, exactly. We don't really have any, and the first volunteer who gets his head chopped off is presumably
and Kazim, Kazim, the
true.
Brotherhood of the
Kazim.
Cruciform Sword.
Yeah. And so, and he's not, they didn't do too bad with him, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, he did try and kill everyone and sort of played up.
Yeah.
Wow, maybe we should have unpacked that.
Yeah, I think we might have skipped over that one because we love the comedy so much. And this is so much funnier than either of the other two. Like, they really leaned into the comedy and it worked so well. They just like, the script is really smooth. And I feel like it all just works and like clicks and works in a way that is really satisfying. Like, the action works, the comedy works, the acting works, and it's really fun to watch. And just like the little bits of character development we get from Brody, which they just kind of, like you said, he was just kind of an exposition machine in the first movie. And this one, it's like, we didn't really know him that well. And when you get to know Marcus Brody, he's really funny and maybe possibly not that smart, but like, it's really enjoyable. And Sean Connery is, especially when he comes later in the movie, it's so breath of fresh air to a movie that was already really entertaining. And he's incredible in it. Just really, really funny. And that the scene on the Zeppelin when they have their father-son moment over the dinner table is a masterclass in character development. We kind of have hinted at it, but we really get this like kind of, they really talk about it, about how he was never home or like whatever. And that it just like, it's pretty quick, and it also provides exposition for the story because that's where they talk about the 3 trials. It's a really great, well, tightly written scene, and it's a good example of this entire movie. And Your Inner Child is not an idiot. It's great.
I mean, I feel like the movie, I mean, if you described it on paper, especially in this sequelized like period that we are in Hollywood, I'd be like, that just sounds like you've got this book that gives you all the answers and you have, them overcorrecting from the last movie that people didn't like as much. And you've got the father thing. I think it only works because we've already established Indiana Jones as a character. You couldn't have this in even the second movie. I think it works best as like, if you get an opportunity to make a third movie, it works because we already know Indiana Jones. What else are we going to learn about him? Oh, we see this dynamic with his father, which reveals a whole other side to him while also, keeping the adventure going.
Yeah, you could very well see that being done poorly, and executed not as well. Like, for example, Daddy's Home 2. It was like...
with also a wife abuser, Mel Gibson.
Yeah. We'll talk about that another
and also
time.
has Nazis in it. Also Mel Gibson.
What do you think, everybody, about The Last Crusade? Oh, we didn't really talk about the Crusades themselves.
Ooh, good. Good, we didn't talk about the Crusades.
I mean, genocide is bad. Genocide is bad.
Don't be a crusader.
In
general.
I mean, I'm glad it's the last one. And we're done with
After
them.
this one, we are done.
Let's finally
just get it out of our system.
Just
Don't
one more?
that.
No.
Done.
No. What do you think, everybody? Email us. yourinnerchildisanidiot@gmail.com. You can text us or leave a voicemail, 615-576-0525. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/yourinnerchildisanidiot. We'd like to thank our current patrons, including Shit on the Cartouche,
David Mort,
Jonathan J.,
Jeremy Powlen,
Lindsay Halik. That was a good one.
That's a good one. Larissa Maestro, also a good one.
Karen Card,
Heather Tuggle,
Travis Vance,
Damon's Australian accent,
Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Now, was I doing
Lindsay.
Sean Connery or Captain Jean-Luc Picard?
You might have been doing a Jean-Luc Picard with a cold. Lindsay Nell,
The Hands of Fate.
Dan McIntyre.
Jackson has an unhealthy obsession with Damon. Obsession?
You're turning into Bane. I feel like you're bordering on Bane.
I was born in the darkness.
The elusive fan Gromkin.
Josh Frigo.
Dramatically placed hot dog.
You're the man now, Beth Surmont.
Oh, I should have done that on Hot Dog. Hizoner the mayor.
The supreme ruler of this podcast.
Just cuz.
Scalfasaurus. It's too many S's. Sorry, Scalf.
Yes, Dr. Malcolm's heaving bosom.
Particle Man.
T. Smith.
The Zesty. Thank you all very, very much for supporting us despite our Sean Connery impression. If you want to support like that,
well, we'll see what the Patreon list is next week.
Patreon.com/Your Inner Child is an Idiot.
Before we leave, I want to remind our listeners that Sean Connery's last movie before he retired and promptly died was Guardians of the Highlands. Now, if that sounds serious, please note it is an animated movie about a skateboarding grandpa. So check it out. Guardian of the Highlands.
Skateboarding grandpa.
Also released under the title Sir Billy, and it is nightmare fuel. I just want you to know that.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
I want you to know that.
If you want some Patreon exclusive stuff, we are going to watch the very unfortunate Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones, and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for our patrons only. So that's a reason.
Actually, that one's with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's the odd man out.
Indiana Jones under the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Kingdom Skull.
My mouth fell apart. All right.
The human body was not built to do Sean Connery's voice all the time. Even he had to take a break.